are Black people so broke? I learned something from the pandemic, and I connected it with how Black people operate with money in the household. And I'm gonna use my household for an example of what I grew up in. During the pandemic, remember online, no one could talk about COVID, no one could talk about cures, no one could talk about, anything that, could possibly help you with COVID, or you couldn't say anything bad about COVID, you couldn't say anything about it being a conspiracy or any of that stuff. The thing is, if you open up the conversation, we would have known about a lot of that. So a lot of that stuff kind of got out word of mouth and by platforms that weren't censored. And one thing you learn is that the more stuff was censored, the more nothing got talked about, the more, nothing got solved. So one thing that I learned how to connect that to Black money is, in my household growing up, money was always kind of bad. It was just like, oh, we ain't got that, and there was no type of resolution on, how we supposed to get the money to pay for this stuff that we want. Like, why is it always a struggle that we can't have something? How come, we're not taking the steps in order to, get what we want? And it's not even a material type thing. Like, even when it just come to going out to dinner, maybe every weekend or something like that, we couldn't do that because we always never had enough money. That was always the issue. We never had enough. Or, my mom should be like, oh, like, what, you gonna pay for that? You gonna get a job? You gonna pay for that? This and that? There was never any type of, thing about money. And then when we finally did talk about money, much later, I'm talking about like, all the way into my dang near 30s, you sit down there and try to have a serious conversation with your family about money and see how they react. How my family reacted was, my mom, she got super upset, super mad what I said to her and what I said about our family and not having anything. So I told her we basically a bunch of bums. Like, we got enough money to pay bills and eat out every so often, but that's nothing. And not even comparing it to anybody else, I was like, our family isn't comfortable. Like, we still have to worry about when we go out to the grocery store, if we spending too much, or we got to worry about it, not being able to pay for organic food opposed to regular food. Like, basically at this point, you have to pay to not get poisoned. You have to pay extra to not eat the poisonous food. Most food is, we all know about the, GMOs. We all know about the stuff being, food just being made out of chemicals, not really real food, and finding food with the least amount of ingredients in it as possible, the least processed as possible. But anyway, when I, even when my brother, he looking at me nervous, because what my mom said, which, again, back to the pandemic, people were nervous to say anything to people because, they were scared of how they were going to react. In which that's why our family really never talked about money, because we were scared about how people who are older than us or people who took care of us, how they would react. So we got to see that reaction right there. We got to see why no Black family talks about money, because that's not just in my family. Any family, especially coming from Chicago, all the families said the same thing. Anytime you did talk about money, they reacted the same way. And that's going all the way from the grandparents and the great grandparents all the way down. Nobody was comfortable, and that's over a 100-year span. I think that we had in our family at the time. My great grandma and great granddad, all the way, up to us. That's over it's in between 100 years. So most families are broke because nobody want to open up that conversation. Nobody wants to talk about it. And that's kind of one of the saddest things. And, you bring it up, even if you open it up, the conversation, people still have their ways and have their feelings about it because they felt that way for so long. They've been in that, broke person mentality. They don't want to open up their mind to something new that's going to get them out the trenches. So that was just one of my thoughts, and I made that connection. I was like, a lot of stuff with the pandemic, a lot less people would have died if they just opened up the conversation and, people talked about the whole ivermectin and all the other, different little treatments that they have out there. A lot less people would have died if these other like kind of big companies weren't so greedy to make money. The big companies lobby to make sure that all these other cures that were better than theirs and that could have been tried out on a lot of people, they made sure that no one talked about those. So when it came to censorship, they were completely fine with it because their companies were still making millions and billions. So the black families, we could be in the millions and billions if we were able to just open up that conversation about money and have like serious conversations about how to make it, what we need to stop doing, what we need to do more of, and I feel like we'd be better off. A lot of people are scared of this ain't talked about either, but a lot of people are scared of black people, really, really getting on top of their stuff. We all know about the Black Wall Street thing and how it could have even spread to a lot of other places, and we would have a lot more like these really nice, wealthy neighborhoods, like even Roswell, Georgia. Like, black people, once we really get up, we spread. Once we make that money, we start, people start getting, we spread. So it was just one of my thoughts. I'm actually on a drive to Georgia right now from Miami. So I just thought that was just on my mind, and that connection popped into my head, and I was like, Jesus Christ, if we just open up the conversation and stop censoring and stop, feeling bad about saying what's on our minds, man, we would go so much further. So much further.